joining.
Brilliant.
All right, Gavin. So welcome to this member conference call. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Yanis. Hello, everybody. I've really been looking forward to this. I've met with a number of people about creating sustainable websites, and obviously sustainability is a wonderful topic. Normally, I'm talking about accessibility, and I'll show you today that there's a lot of crossover, which is wonderful. And yeah, I'm hoping that there's a lot of takeaways, tips, and actions, and that this will generate a large amount of thought and conversation with you. And I'd love to discuss more in the Q&A later today as well. This is a photograph I took at 7 a.m. this morning in my local park, and I'm in London, and I'm just looking at the sky on my morning run. And I think you can see like what's happening here. There's a lot of air traffic, 7 a.m. I'm not even, like in a particularly busy place. You can't hear the airplanes or anything like that. So it just kind of struck me as to what's going on. It's in many ways hugely positive in that, air travel started back up again. We are, we're meeting people, we're going abroad, we're traveling, we're having adventures. It is also something we really need to consider in terms of the impact on our planet and so on. So what we're going to focus on today is really, how the internet affects our planet. And so these figures I got from Christian. He may be able to join the call. Jorgensen, a typo consult. 27% of the greenhouse gases are emitted by our electricity consumption. So this is where kind of we need to think about with the internet and websites in terms of sustainability. The key thing is the electrical usage. So what we want to do is reduce our electricity. If we're aiming to improve our websites, that's the key driver, the thing we need to focus on. So internet activity accounts for 9% of the world's total energy consumption. So it's a very big footprint that the internet is having, and it's very important. It's understandable that it uses so much. We can see that that's a huge part of it. So we need to, everything that we can do to optimize and keep that percentage as low as it can be, we're going to have a much better outcome in terms of our beautiful planet. Also, the use of the internet is increasing all the time. So, that energy activity is going to increase as well. Last week, Jerry did an amazing presentation to us, and I really loved seeing all of that information from you, Jerry. This thing stuck to me. We've moved from being consumers to being devourers. And I mean, personally, I can relate to this very much. And it's kind of, it's just something that stuck with me a lot. So in talking with Christian this week as well about sustainable websites, I'll talk more about what his work in a moment. He talked about this, so how much do we scroll? And I was like, what? Okay, so obviously the more web pages and more web content we consume, the more electricity we're using, the more energy is used, the more CO2 gas we're creating. Not great for the environment. So we kind of want to minimize some of this. But I love this idea that basically we scroll so much on average that we're running 2 marathons a year with our thumbs. And it kind of tickled me. Okay, so to get into kind of the point of today, which is about what do we do for sustainability through our websites? How can we in our day-to-day life as web professionals, what are the little things that we can do and the bigger things that we can do to make our websites more sustainable? So this is a nice summary by an organization called Supercool. When we share the slides, the link is in there. So they've summarized it really nicely. Basically, you want to switch your website to hosting provided by green renewable energy. There are a lot of hosts now that do this. That provide, some of them even give back like 3 times as much clean energy and all sorts of great things. So definitely green hosting is a good option. Improving your user experience, and this is where it really helps with everything, is they all sort of tie in all of these best practices. So that people find the information they need without needing to go through more pages than is necessary. So there's less content used, less data transfer between the client and the server. Lighten the load of your website, so reduce your image sizes, remove autoplay from videos, possibly the biggest one we can do. Don't use lots of font weights. Reduce the amount of content that you are having. Really be more concise with your content as well. And clean up the code and improve the SEO so your users spend less time browsing. Now, here are another whole lot of tips, and we can discuss more about these as well. The not playing auto videos is so key because the video load is obviously massive in terms of data transfer. This is also a key one for accessibility. The WCAG guidelines are very clear that you should never autoplay something in animation. Nothing must move. The user must control all of those kind of things. So it's great to see that there's an overlap with sustainability as well. Reduce your image noise, remove broken links. You don't want a user going to a dead page. It's just a waste of energy as well in all senses. Removing unnecessary content from your pages, removing unnecessary pages from your sites, removing unnecessary sites from your estates. This is kind of fun. A lot of conference calls, I just heard about this idea this week. People are switching off their video after 5 minutes because of the data transfer usage. And so it's nice to switch on your video, say hi, and then we don't need to kind of see everything after that. You can also, this I learned as well, you can set your browser to automatically close tabs after a particular period, and you can choose what that period is, like a day, a week, a month, and so on. And by closing those tabs, you're then reducing the energy usage again, not only of your device, but also if that web page or some of the pages that are on those tabs are automatically reloading content, which is very, very common nowadays, you're then also putting load on servers and stuff. So it's a really nice one to do. Also, use a content delivery network as data does not travel as far. So if you're putting your content onto a content delivery network and the client is going to be going to a server which is closer to them geographically, uses less energy. There's a great, so getting very technical in a second, from a developer's perspective, what can we do? And this is where we start to come into the kind of the scoring and the coding that we can create in terms of creating a sustainability score for web pages. There is an inspector and it'll tell you how much code is not used. So it's deployed in your page, but is actually never run by the web page. And the stats on this are quite surprising in terms of how much unused code there is in each web page. So I think you can say what is measured is managed. And if we can, encourage our development teams to look at these tools this is called code coverage. So look at Chrome and find out, like you'll often find 70% of the code on the page is not used at all. So it does not need to be present. It's not always that simple to reduce that code because it can be quite complex, but it's something to be aware of from the developer's perspective. And I think it's nice to get this practice in. When Lighthouse created the scores in terms of accessibility, SEO, best practice, progressive web applications, etc., a few years ago, almost every website had awful scores with Lighthouse. Now what we see over years and years of using it is because people have been using those scores to measure their web pages, measure how good their web pages are. All of those scores have gone up across the board because people are using it. So code coverage is a great one developers can go to. This is also something I've learned, is that good accessibility is good sustainability. Good performance is good sustainability. Good SEO is good sustainability. So there's lovely round circle here of best practices across the board that we've all been doing for many times. It's now just we need to think of them also as being good for sustainability. And I think that really helps. So the devil of video, and this is really where the data transfer is. So it's kind of, we need to think about that a lot, as 60% of internet traffic is video in terms of data transfer. This is broken up 1/3 of each of these things, basically YouTube and video services like Vimeo, and then video streaming, so Teams, Google Meet, etc. And then the other third is porn. So reducing video traffic by optimizing videos, using less video, using shorter videos, not autoplaying videos, are all good ways that we can reduce that impact as well. So I have a series of really wonderful resources that I wanted to share with you as well, things that I've learned from over the last couple of weeks in preparing for this presentation. So firstly, I met with James Cannings from MMT Digital, and thank you, James, fantastic talk. James has a brilliant resource here in terms of sustainability and the work he's been doing. He's the Chief Sustainability Officer of MMT Digital. The work James has done over a number of years is incredibly impressive, and I really encourage you to look at the green pages. What this is a single place to go to find every good thing written on sustainability, particularly about web sustainability as well. So a lot of the resources I found were from here. Also, if you've built something or if you're doing something from a sustainability perspective and you feel that that would benefit from being on this directory, please get in touch with James and discuss and see if we can get that listed here as well. So I learned about Tim Frick as well and Mighty Bytes and the great work that Tim's done. I know that he is also talking at the Boy Conference very soon as well. So I'd encourage you to look up Tim. He has literally written the book on web sustainability, and his company Mighty Bytes really help organizations to make sustainable websites. If you've not done it so far, have a look at ecograder.com. You can put in your website and they actually will give you already a sustainability score. That's great. It's based on the Google Lighthouse scores in terms of SEO and best practices and so forth, but it's really worthwhile seeing the results here. Just to take a segue into the sustainability score, what we would like to do is, this EcoGrade is great. It's a really helpful tool. I'd like us to actually create something similar open source that then implements some standards. So James Canning's work at the moment is putting together a thought leadership team to create the standards around web sustainability in the same way that WCAG have created them with the W3C around web accessibility. So the eventual aim is James's work will tie in with whatever the W3C does in terms of contributing there. What we would like to do from the sustainability score is create an open source piece of code that you can run against your web page, and it will tell you, as a designer, you should optimize this image, don't autoplay this video, and use a CDN. And those kind of tips and tools would be what we would like to achieve. Also, have a look at the Green Web Foundation. They will tell you if your web host is in their directory. If you know that your web host is green already and is not listed, then please do get in touch with them as well to add it to their directory. And this is Christian Jorgensen from Typo Consult's wonderful project. At the moment, he is translating all this into English, but he has a wonderful one tool here that does a high-level report, much more for kind of C-level execs to understand how to improve web pages and websites. So I'd definitely encourage you to have a look at this as well. This project is still in beta, but it's going to be launched very soon. There's a resource called Sustainable Web Design, and this is a lovely tool. I think Tim Frick is involved in this as well. And it's all tips and tricks on what to do in terms of design from a sustainability perspective. If you're taking sustainability seriously, we should always, as an organization, have a policy around it. Us as Little Forest are starting to create ours as well. Basically, I would strongly recommend talking and getting in touch with Christina Podner on this. She literally wrote the book on policies. Ecology, basically these people will plant trees for you. So this is to offset your carbon footprint as an organization. Small side point here, this wonderful looking website of theirs, this is a great service. Please do this. As Little Forest, we're going to invest in this as well to reduce our emissions or offset them. This wonderful video auto plays when you go to their website. So it's something we should actually say to them. And it's what I've started to notice a lot of, is a lot of organizations who are very pro sustainability, pro the planet, doing all sorts of brilliant work. Their websites are really not following sustainability best practices. So we really need to kind of get that message across, talk about it more, and so forth. Get people's awareness of how to make a sustainable web page much higher than what it is right now. I'd really encourage you to go and sign the Sustainable Web Manifesto and just sign up to that and just show that that you're keen and believe in this. And excitingly, in just under a month, I think there's a UX Connect in Aarhus. So Janus is running this conference, which is all about sustainable design. There's some amazing speakers going. Be wonderful to connect there as well. I think there's going to be a lot of good learning, and I'm excited to see that. So in terms of next steps to being more sustainable, sign the Sustainable Web Manifesto, create a sustainability pledge for your organization. So all that is to just say, okay, we're going to look to have green web hosting. You know, it's going to take some time to move to it, but we're going to do that. We're going to make sure that our suppliers are as sustainable as possible. We're going to offset our carbon by using ecology. And then create a sustainability policy for your organization. I've really not seen this on many websites at all. Start to look in the footer of all these websites, and we've got all the good policies there, like accessibility and all the other ones, privacy and so forth. I'd love that in a year's time, we start to regularly see a sustainability policy at the bottom of every web page. Optimize your website. Get in touch with me if you want to go through some of these, take the slides, we'll share them afterwards. Those tips and tricks that you can use, and there's so many good resources there. And then give a talk about sustainability as well. It certainly helped me to learn a lot about it. I hope it'll help you. That's it, Giannis. We got time for Q&A as well now.
Thank you, Gavin. We just made it. Thanks for basically sharing the progress you made so far, the research you found. Curious to hear a little bit more about your idea or your pledge to basically come up with a sustainability score for websites. Could you just tell me a little bit more, like how early, like how are we between idea and product?
A long way. So we've not written a line of code. The plan is to create an open source project, and so on GitHub, and get as many people to contribute to that as possible. Having talked with James Canning earlier and getting excited about, they will look to be creating and documenting the standards to follow for web sustainability. What I then pledged to James is that we would write code for anything that's testable. So, okay, this image, you could optimize this image and save 250 kilobytes. We would then implement that test in code.
So a little bit similar to Google Lighthouse scores for accessibility, SEO, and performance.
Really similar, exactly. And I think, you know, that hopefully then that can be used by other organizations and so on.
Very good. All right, let's see if anybody else has questions, comments, reflections. I can keep asking away, but I'm sure there's somebody else as well. I tried to share a couple of comments, related links in the chat as well. But why don't we start with Surapi?
Hi, Gavin. You mentioned that in the event that you know, content is hosted on a closed network. What was the right way to articulate that? Is that a closed network?
CDN. So
CDN.
content delivery network. So that basically all that would do is make sure that the website was closer to the client.
Right. So what happens in the case when your target audiences are far away from you? Say your website is in the Nordics, whereas you're catering to the global south. Is there any way to mitigate such a situation?
That's exactly what a CDN does.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why it's a good practice. So for that sort of exact reason.
Okay. So it doesn't matter if your audience is ultimately very far off, but they're closer nonetheless to the content. Yeah.
They'll be closer to your content. Precisely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Does anybody have any feedback? I can pick on some. I'm always a little bit cautious because I never know if people have stepped away or are in a noisy location. Perhaps Jerry, would you mind giving Gavin a little bit of feedback, sharing your opinions?
No, it's great to see Gavin, and you know, everything you've said makes a lot of sense. The one area I think I thought you'll have heard a train go by there in a second that I've been kind of trying to get into is the whole impact of the devices. That, you know, it's we can measure the electricity more easily, but 80% of the pollution occurs in the actual devices that we're using to browse these websites. So, but I know that's a much harder thing to actually measure and to quantify. But you know, it's a hard nut to crack. But everything else that you were listing there makes total sense. And if people follow that, we'd have a lot of improvement.
So what you're saying, Jerry, is perhaps to give extra points for people accessing from an old device?
Well, yeah, you know, it's harder. See, you know, if you're a big website like Firefox did an example with their browser, and they did a measure of all their CO2 impact, and 2% of it was operational, was, you know, their offices and their developers. 98% of it was people using the browser. So if you've got a really big government website, let's say, most of your CO2 is happening on your user's device if there's 100,000 people. But it's very hard to quantify that. It's very, very hard to get at that. But that's where a lot of the actual energy is, either in creating the website or creating the content, and it's hard to quantify that, or in, you know, if you've got 1 million people using, well, then it's 4 minutes on whatever their devices every month or something like that. And I was wondering, had you thought about that, or did you say that that's just outside the scope? Or
absolutely, the eco grader does bring that in. So if you run through the eco grader, it'll ask you for your average traffic per month for exactly that reason. And it'll say, you know, and so I was thinking about that from analytics, and obviously everyone's drive is to get as many visitors as possible to their website every month. So then how does that work with sustainability? So I think it can only really work through optimization and best practices, because we're always going to want to, as organizations, increase the size of our audience, relevant audience.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting. Yep.
So let me pass it over to Katie, joining us from New York City.
Hi, how's it going? Good morning. It's funny, yeah, you're like, you know, I don't know if people have like a noisy situation. It's always noisy here. So yeah, it's interesting. So when thinking about sustainability for websites, honestly, it was something that I haven't given a ton of thought. So for context, for those that haven't met me, by the way, I work at Shopify, and I specifically work on the Shopify email app, which I think for us, when I think about sustainability, it generally comes down to performance and accessibility. And so as far as what you're speaking about, which is generally, you know, get people through your page faster, get people to find what they need faster. On the performance side, I feel like we've often let that kind of go to like the engineers. So thinking about, you know, loading on the front end versus constantly reloading a page on the server side. But then as a UX designer, I think a lot of it comes down to both accessibility and then also thinking about information architecture, content strategy behind the app, making sure that they can find whatever they need elsewhere in the admin without having to like dive through all of the Shopify admin to find that. So it's a really interesting thing for me to think about. Honestly, hadn't given it too much thought through the lens of sustainability. I've been thinking about it more through the lens of, you know, accessibility and usability, which ultimately I think kind of is all tied up together. Like you said, good performance equals good sustainability, good accessibility equals good sustainability. So it's a really interesting lens for me to like think about that through. So yeah, this is great. The one question that I did have though was around this, the Lighthouse score. Like, is that something, I'm not familiar with it. Is it something that can be used on digital apps or like website apps, or is it mostly websites themselves?
It's mainly on websites, but if your app is web driven, you can use Lighthouse on it as well. I could have a call with you, Katie, and show you how to do it. It's really simple.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, the eco grader uses Lighthouse underneath.
Cool.
Very good. Thank you, Katie. We still have time for one or two more if anybody has feedback, comments, reflections. All right, let's jump to pretty much where we started. Tobias?
Yeah, hello. Great presentation, Gavin. As always, when we're talking about sustainability, whether it's, you know, plane travel or eating meat or whatever, you know, it's hard to get a grasp of how big an impact a certain change has.
Yes.
I mean, how much is a steak compared to a plane trip to Aarhus, for instance? And I mean, I'm a bit skeptic about all the talk about funds, because I can see that a lot of people are talking about funds. And I mean, a fund is something like 100 kilobytes, and I know that it loads on every page, but I mean, once it's loaded on the first page, it's not loaded on the second page, and so on. And I mean, if I remove a video or a large image, I guess, from a busy page, I guess that's much more effective than spending, you know, I don't know how many hours of development and stuff switching to Arial font instead of our custom font. I mean, I'm just trying to. In my organization, it's really important that we spend the time most effectively on the thing that does the biggest change. And I mean, everybody's talking about fonts. It always comes up, and I mean, let's just talk about the video, and then we can talk about fonts in 3 or 4 years when we fixed all the other stuff. I mean,
100 times agree with you completely.
It's more a comment than a question.
Focus on the big thing. Yeah.
But I think, Jerry, didn't you write a blog post a year or two ago, if I can pull you in again, on exactly this? Or was it fonts?
Maybe something, yeah. No, Tobias is right. You need to get, I mean, and as Gavin pointed out, the videos, the huge mega, you know, 100 times, you know, it's video and images that are 80% of a page's weight. You know, I'd say 80, you know, so, you know, if you're start with the videos and all those autoplays and stuff like that, and you got to have a scale of action, and Tobias is absolutely, the fonts are relatively small, but at the same time, you know, so you don't want to overdo it. If it's a simple job to do, you know, because sometimes you've got multiple fonts. If you're downloading it, if it's 16 point, you're downloading if it's italic. So depending on the font types, they can have multiple iterations and downloads, but they are definitely not in the mega scale of what you should be focusing on first.
Yeah.
Thank you. I hope it was okay. I could weave Jerry in as well. Gavin, I would say also, like Tobias and others have done, thank you very much for preparing this for us. Much appreciated.
Thanks so much. It was wonderful.
Great stuff, Gavin. Well done.
Thank you.